This book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, came out of me because of a growing frustration in the gap between what one thinks of as strategy and what passes for strategy in so many companies, in so many politicians' mouths, in so many government agencies, in so many nonprofits, universities, school systems. They say they have a strategy, but they don't. They have something else, something I call bad strategy. And bad strategy is not the absence of strategy, it's an active force of mistaken belief in how to think strategically and how to create strategies. And so this book aims to try to paint these two pictures. Also, for those of you who are studying here at the London School of Economics, you might know that business strategy today is conceptualized mainly in terms of economics, in terms of competitive positioning within an environment, a competitive environment of some kind, of business, an industry structure, and that competitive advantage within that industry is the coin of the realm. What I'm going to do today is talk about a different view of strategy. I'm not going to say that the economics view is incorrect, because it's not. It's quite correct. But it is only one view. That if we're going to talk about strategy for a nation state, or a hospital, or a government agency, or a school, or a business firm, we have to use a language other than competing within an industry. Because that's only one possible regime. Well, that's the introduction to what we're going to do. I want to take you back to think about strategy to 1996. And a company called Apple was almost bankrupt. Now, this is the first time I had some interactions with Steve Jobs, who's recently passed away. This is Business Week cover, the fall of American icon. They're basically writing the obituary for Apple. And what has killed Apple is Windows 95. That Microsoft has come out with a graphical user interface, Mice and Windows, which was originally the Apple innovation. And given that, Apple's market share has taken an extreme dive. And in October of 1996, when Steve Jobs comes back to take the position of CEO for no pay, Apple's 2 months from bankruptcy. That's how much cash it has. That's how quick the cash burn is. Now, the advice from outsiders, what was it? Wall Street people said, do a deal. Get yourself bought by Sony. Get yourself bought by Sun. Get yourself bought by IBM. Get yourself bought by Hewlett-Packard. You're basically out of business. The techies, the Silicon Valley people said, well, maybe you should sell your software to Microsoft, or maybe you should invent something new and cool. Maybe you should do voice recognition or 3D. When Steve Jobs came back, he had a reputation of being a technical person, sort of, although he wasn't an engineer. The investment community wasn't very hopeful. They didn't know what was going to happen, but they didn't think much. They figured he would do a deal. Now, what did he do? He didn't sell himself to IBM. These are recommendations from Wired magazine. He didn't do licensing his name to everyone. He didn't do these popular recommendations. What he did do might be called Business 101. First of all, he did a nice deal with Microsoft. He got them to give his company $150 million. Now, I would like to do that for Microsoft. How did he do that? Well, Microsoft was under antitrust threat for being a monopolist. It's something that happens all the time in the US, a little bit more here, a little bit less here in the UK. Every time you have a successful company, it gets sued. So Microsoft was under antitrust threat, and the last thing Microsoft wanted was for Apple to go bankrupt. So $150 million came in. That was a big help. That puts bankruptcy off by about 6 months. They had 16 models of desktop computer they were trying to sell. This is after the CEO had struggled to fix his company for 3 years. Steve Jobs cut the 15 models down to 1. He threw them out. He said to me, my wife's sister asked me which computer to buy. And I looked at the computers we were selling and I couldn't figure out which one to recommend. And he said, I'm the CEO. And if I can't figure it out, how can a customer figure it out? We only need one. So he dropped everything but one. He dropped all the printers and peripherals. No more printers, no more scanners, no more. He dropped all software development. All software. Canceled it. Fired the software engineers. Everybody was amazed. Steve Jobs, he's the technical guy. He cut the hardware engineers back to the bone. In his view, they were making bad hardware. Why did he want so many hardware engineers? He cut 5 of the 6 national retailers. Well, they had many retailers. He cut it back to 1. It was CompUSA. He moved all the manufacturing to Taiwan. No longer would we make any Apple products in the United States. And he opened up a web store to sell direct to customers. Now, what do these actions all add up to? What's the strategy here? Excuse me?
Keep it simple.
Keep it alive. At one level, you could say, hey, it's just cost cutting. It's business 101. Every single step he did here, and he did this very quickly in a matter of 4 months, he's aimed at survival. We're about to go bankrupt. We're not going to do R&D. We're not going to do product development. We're not going to have all these reasons. We're going to cut it back to a core that can survive. We cut off the extremities. Now, people were surprised. Why were they surprised? Because they don't expect to see anybody actually perform this kind of focused action. People are surprised when they see an actual strategy. They don't expect to see a strategy. We expect to see our leaders espouse fluffy goals and try to do everything. Oh, we're going to have everything. We're going to have better education and better health care and better social services and faster railways. We're going to have it all. And down that road lies nothing. That's not strategy. That's vacuous promises. Strategy is about focus. And everything that Jobs did here was focused on a single short-term objective, which was survival. That's it. That's what he was after here. And I sat down with him a year later, and I said, okay, you're surviving. You've got 4% of the desktop market. The Windows Intel machines have still won. What's your long-term thing here? What's your real strategy? I understand the focus on survival. And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to wait for the next big thing. That's what he said. And I was bowled over. I had just spent 6 months interviewing something like 75 executives in electronics, both in Europe and the United States. These were division managers and CEOs of electronics companies. And I had asked each one of them several simple questions. One, why? First question was, who's the most successful player in your industry, in your business? Everybody could identify that. They knew who it was. And then I'd ask them, how did that player get to be so successful? And of course, this was 1996, 97, 98, electronics, and they all had basically the same story. The story was something had changed, some new technology had appeared, some new window of opportunity had opened. And this company, the successful one, was the first one to jump through that in a clever or an adroit way. So then I'd say, okay, what is your strategy? What are you guys doing? And they give me this long list of things they're doing. They say, oh, we are forming network relationships, and we are moving software to firmware, and we are doing 360-degree feedback, and we are transferring best practices. They're doing everything but what they said success comes from, which is waiting for a window of opportunity to open and then jumping through it full force with a huge amount of energy and focus to take that next opportunity. That's what Jobs was saying. He was saying, I'm going to wait for the next big thing. That was an intelligent answer in that industry at that moment. And he did. The next big thing for him was the iPod. And then the iPhone. And then the iPad. And in each case, there was a window of opportunity that opens and he went after it. Full force, full focus. That whole list of things. The software, the hardware, the manufacturing, the distribution, the design, all of those things focused on pushing that product through to excellence. That's strategy. A man named Chad Logan hired me to take a look at his company. He said, I need your help with strategy. Please come by and talk to me and my people. I came by. And I said, Chad, you're a graphics arts company. He inherited the company from his uncle. His uncle had passed away a couple of years before. He was a high school football hero turned graphics artist, now manager. I said, what's the strategic issue here? He said, well, we have a plan. I call it the 2020 plan. 20% growth in revenues a year and 20% after-tax profits. That's the plan. I said, oh, okay, those are great goals, but what's the strategy? How is this fairly ordinary graphics arts company going to do this? He said, well, one thing I learned as a football player is you have to have the will to win. That's the main thing. And we're just going to push until we achieve this. I said, well, do you have a strategy other than 2020? He said, yes. And he had a plaque actually up on the wall that said, our strategies. We're going to be the graphics arts firm of choice. We will delight our customers. Then the two key things, we'll grow our revenue 20% a year. We'll maintain a profit margin of 20% or better. We have a culture of commitment. We'll foster honest and open work environment. We'll support the broader community in which we serve. This is a little before everybody puts sustainability and a greener world in their strategies. But there's nothing here that's about strategy. It's all puff. It's all about things we think are nice plus results we'd like to achieve. That's bad strategy. Now, if Chad Logan and his graphics art company was the only place you saw this kind of thing, it wouldn't be a big deal. But in company after company, in hundreds, thousands of corporations, that's what you get. This is a corporation, I was attending their big strategy meet they had. They had 200 or 300 senior managers from around the world. It's a big company. The picture, I had to clip from a U.S. election campaign. But there was a big release of balloons, which is why I clipped that picture. And the CEO, they had a movie of the company's products, specially produced. They had specially music that was played. The CEO gave a speech about the new strategy. And the strategy was, we're going for global leadership, we're going for growth, and we're going for shareholder return. And then there were breakout sessions where individual managers sort of had to get together and buy in to this vision. But where's the strategy? It's not there. So you think, okay, well, this is a motivational thing. They must have a planning system behind that. They develop some methods. Yeah, they do. They have an annual strategic plan. It looks 3 years ahead. And every September, they start a new one. And every June, they finish the annual strategic plan. And the first year of each annual strategic plan becomes next year's budget. What it is, it's a forecast of the economy and a forecast of their revenues and a forecast of their profits. It's a bunch of financial results. It's not a strategy. The strategy is not what you hope your performance will be. A strategy is about how you're going to get there. It's bad strategy. I developed the phrase bad strategy at a national security conference in 2007, where we were looking at fairly classified and unclassified documents. There were only 9 of us in the room. There was a former head of CIA, a former head of the Department of Defense. I was the lightweight in the room. And their big complaint was there's no strategy. What we got is national goals. You know, we got democracy. We've got to end terrorism. We want to not have people have weapons of mass destruction. But then you look down and you say, okay, how are we going to do that? It says, we will pursue a world in which there are no weapons of mass destruction in the hands of our enemies. Okay, yeah, and then how are you going to do that? Doesn't say. Now, it didn't used to be that way. You used to have sort of the difficult, here's what we're going to do. We're going to focus on this. Bad strategy. Now, before you pull out your antidepressants, there are plenty of good strategies out there. And here's Lou Gerstner, his turnaround of IBM. When he walked into IBM in 1993, it was a difficult moment. IBM's mainframe business had gone like that. The PC business had commoditized. It was a mess. Lou Gerstner looked at it. The advisors came in, the Wall Street advisors, investment banking advisors. Everyone was prepared to split IBM up into pieces. The idea was that the computer industry had fragmented. That instead of integrated companies making all aspects of computing like IBM and NCR and so on, there were now operating system companies, memory companies, hard disk companies, etc. And so IBM itself should fragment to match. And Gerstner said, no, that's crazy. I mean, if you fragment, you're going to lose the base of competence, and you're going to lose the knowledge about all the different customers in the world. So what we're going to have to do is stop being an integrated company and turn and be a solutions provider. And if the solution is a non-IBM product, that's the way it's going to be. IBM was no longer going to be a company that pushes its own products. Now, to do that took 8-9 years. Most of the challenges he faced were organizational. They had fiefdoms all over the world that fought this. The head of IBM India, great guy, he rewrote the memos that he passed on to people. They came in from headquarters. There was a huge amount of opposition to this, and it got handled. It got handled over time. This is a dramatic change in strategy. In everything that Gerstner put in place, the firing of 75,000 people, the rehiring of many people, the huge reductions in the internal processes and outsourcing many, many processes, the enormous pressure to change processes to become speedier and higher quality. All of that was focused around this goal of that kind of change. Now that's a strategy. He understood the problem, and he devised an approach to dealing with the problem. He didn't say, oh, we're going to return to 10% growth. That's not a strategy. That's a hope. That's an aspiration. So what's a strategy? Excuse me. A bad strategy and a good strategy. I'm going to give you the hallmarks of bad strategy. First, 4 big hallmarks. I'm going to say what's a good strategy, and then I'm going to emphasize some of those pieces for you. A bad strategy is when it's all goals. This is an old graph, but it should be familiar to anybody who's looked at corporate strategic plans. It's a perfect hockey stick. It shows profits down and then plan to go up. This is International Harvester's strategic plan in 1979. Their attempt to grow profits over the next 5 years. Actually, in 1980 there, and 81 they went bankrupt. They went out of business. So the plan didn't work. Why didn't the plan work? CEOs will say, oh, we had a great plan, but we had problems implementing it. Suggesting somehow that if only people had worked harder, these numbers could have been met. What this plan left out was the elephant in the elevator. International Harvester, at that point in time, had the worst labor relations probably of any company, certainly in the U.S., maybe the world. Harvester was the scene of the Haymarket riots back at the late 1800s. Places, workers were machine gunned. And their labor relations were terrible. Their wage costs were high. The work rules were disastrous. Their costs were higher than anybody else in the industry. It was amazing that they were alive. All right, given that environment, their strategy should have been to deal with that problem somehow. There's several ways you could try to do it. It's very difficult. You probably want to split yourself into separate companies from trucks and agricultural equipment and so on, because it's hard to change a big company. You probably want to try to move some of your plants out of where they exist. And you probably want to try to really dramatically change your labor relations problem. That's critical. That's your strategy. That's your bottleneck. Instead, they did this ridiculous financial forecast. They ignored their basic problem. So, strategy that's all goals. Bad strategy. You know it's a bad strategy when it's all fluff. It's all vaporous concepts. There's a bank that I became acquainted with, and they said, our strategy is customer-oriented disintermediation. They're a retail bank. Of course they're customer-oriented, and disintermediation, that means you're a bank. So the strategy is, we're a bank. But they fluffed it up. How many times have you seen that? Fluff is not a strategy. People confuse the idea of strategy with